episode, the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Benny Becker. Thrilled as always to be with you, gang, here today. Episode 26, the Boog Powell of episodes. It's that man right behind me, Boog. Gotta love him, gotta love his barbecue. Absolutely love Boog. Who knows how many times I've met Boog and gotten his autograph like many Birdland and Oriole fans have over the years. It's one of those things that when you meet kind of a casual Orioles fan, if you will, they always have that story of meeting Boog Powell and getting the autograph, and you gotta love it. It's just part of going to Camden Yards, truly. And I love what they've been doing with Boogs recently and had the setup that they have now. It's a great spot, as always. Still phenomenal food, like the first day I had it. Now, the name and title of this episode will be focused around our now primary home run hitter. Boog was the premier Orioles home run hitter back in that day. Now, it's based around Gunnar Henderson. And that's why today's title episode is Gunnar Homerson. Because, hell, that's what he's been doing recently. And we will catch you up on all of that. I want to start with the Seattle series and catching you up through this Mariners series at home that we just came off. We also have last night's game 1 in St. Louis to catch you up on as well. A lot to talk about in this episode. Of course, we will talk about Gunnar Henderson and just how special of a talent he is and how great of a run he's been on. Have a little positive streak going on for these Orioles. We know about the biggest one as far as the sweepless streak goes, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But mainly, it's a different streak we're going to be talking about today, so excited to talk about that. We got to kind of go on Yankees watch right now, guys, so we're going to have a little bit of Yankees watch for the first time this season, and hopefully, as the season progresses, we don't even have to do these because we're coasting by them. But for the moment, it's a tight race, gang. It's a tight race. Have a little bit of a minor league report for you. But mainly what we're going to wind up talking about after the games is officially 2 years with Adley Rutschman on the Orioles. It was May 21st of 2022, his first game ever in the majors. Since then, it's been a phenomenal run. So we have a lot of numbers we want to run by you, kind of just show you how special he's been and how great the Orioles have been since then. A lot to talk about there. Also kind of want to touch on Cole Irvin and just his new role for the moment, what's going to happen with him coming up in the future. I think that we have a pretty good idea now of the plan for Cole Irvin moving forward because he's been phenomenal for us this season. And I also have a bit of a funny story to end on based around a former outfielder of ours, kind of like a no-name player, but a guy that Birdland will certainly remember from the recent past. And it's just one of those names, you know, that when we go back to kind of the bad Orioles teams, it's just one of these names that, hell, these were the names we were talking up back then and talking about back then. So kind of a funny story about a former outfielder to end the episode, okay? But like I said, we got to start back in Baltimore for the Seattle series this past weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday series. 3-game set against the Mariners. And we talked about how the Mariners were really the best team in this, like, 4, maybe 5-game stretch that the Orioles had. They were the only team at or above 500 out of these teams, either that we just finished up with or that we're headed into or currently playing, like the Cardinals. And again, some of them might be solid teams, like the Cardinals. And we'll touch on this when we get to that series. But ultimately, record-wise, they are not performing up to either what they should be or performing up to a peak level. That's why the Mariners were such a big series in this block of teams that we have to face in this little stretch, right? Because, again, we have kind of Murderer's Row coming very soon. So it's important to bang out wins and get series wins against these teams that aren't playing great baseball and aren't at the top like some of these other teams coming up are. Mariners, though, are a very tough team. And we talked about kind of in our preview headed into it how expect some good pitching. Now, we were hoping that we would get good pitching as well, and we did. Primarily, we did get good pitching throughout this series. The Mariners, however, didn't really show us the great pitching that we necessarily expected from their starters. Now, we did see it at times, not always, though. So let's just start on Friday. It's funny. If you remember on last episode, I was talking about how the Orioles really haven't been getting those big innings as of recently. And really, most of the season, I feel like, haven't been putting up big innings with 4, 5, 6 runs. And it's kind of ironic because that first game after recording that episode, they had 5 runs in the first inning, 4 runs in the 7th inning. That's all the runs they got, even though Santander was robbed of a home run at some point, so could have been more. They didn't need the extra run. It was fine. It was a 9-2 victory when it was all said and done. Like I said, 5 in the first. Gunnar Henderson leading off with a home run. Get used to hearing that. Then there was like an error that resulted in a run, a Cowser double, and then a Westberg sac fly. The inning ended, first inning ended with the Orioles having a 5-1 lead. Then in the 7th, the Orioles put up 4 runs off a Gunnar triple, Adley double, Hayes double, and a wild pitch, all of which brought home a run, making it 9-2 at the end of that inning, and ultimately that's where the game ended. Orioles, like I said, having finally those big run innings. And they're not necessary into winning and being one of the best teams in the league. Certainly, the Orioles have done a phenomenal job, as we talked last episode, about just continuing to add runs throughout the game, even if you're not getting those big run innings. But certainly this team is capable of those big run innings, the 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, the real crooked number, as they call it, you know? And those are the ones that really solidify a game. When you leave that first inning up 5-1, you haven't won it, but boy, did you put yourself in the position to cruise to a victory. And that's basically what the Orioles did. John Means, while he struggled at times, especially early, got himself out of a big jam in the first. Again, did allow a run, but ultimately got himself out with only allowing that 1 run. Right? If you look on the flip side, what the Orioles were able to accomplish offensively in that inning, the game got away from Seattle early. So that's what I'm talking about. Even your bad innings, just making it a run or two, as far as your pitchers go, means the world and keeps your team in the ball game, even if the Orioles kind of ran away with it relatively quickly after that. So 6 strong overall from John Means, 2 earned, 6 hits, no walks, 4 Ks. Solid John Means day, man. Solid John Means day. And it's great to see him kind of pitching back to relatively his Cy Young caliber form, because he didn't win the Cy Young, but he was up there in voting the one year. So it's nice to see John Means finally kind of coming back into his own. And I've been having this inkling, right? Like, you know, I'm a gambler, right? So I've been having this inkling of betting the Orioles to get a no-hitter on every day John Means pitches. And, you know, it might be a combined no-hitter because the bet overall is just for a no-hitter to be thrown in the game. Typically, if not always, sits at, I believe, plus 30,000, I believe, which, listen, is a high number, sure, if you hit it. But if you just take it every single day, it's not a high enough number to pay you out unless you finally get a no-hitter relatively early. So it's not necessarily the smartest bet by me to be like, I'm going to bet $100 on just a no-hitter to be thrown in every game John Means pitches the rest of the year. But I just have that feeling, gang. We saw a couple starts ago him basically have that same no-hit stuff. And even in the tough games, like his start before this, I believe he got banged around a little bit. And especially in that second or third inning, it just seemed like the guys were keying up on that low, soft stuff. And maybe it wasn't moving like it typically does. But when it does move like it typically does, it's automatic. And he's getting a lot of outs. And that's pretty much what he did in that game, too, before and after that tough inning, right? So we see that type of stuff. And John Means has already thrown a no-hitter. I'm just saying, bold prediction, John Means might get himself another no-hitter this season, okay? And it wasn't on Friday. Like I said, ended up giving up 6 hits through the 6 innings. But really, that first inning was the toughest one of his day, and he managed to get out with only that 1 run. And ultimately, the story of that game, to me, was just like I said. We said big innings were going to be coming. We said they hadn't gotten them yet, but big innings were coming. The Orioles said, you're right. They're coming. Here they are. Well, didn't necessarily go that way the rest of the series, but ultimately, I think those big innings are going to be coming more frequently for these Orioles as kind of we get to that summer months. Weather starts getting a little better because we've had some tough games to play in. Maybe not the worst weather conditions to play in of any major league team this season, but I'd say we're top third. I mean, we've played in some monsoons, and then we even had a game, I believe it was Saturday, where it was like a 4-hour rain delay for what seemed like no reason. Preakness Day seemed like no reason not to be playing baseball and a little bit of mist, a little bit of drizzle. But the Orioles decided to push it back hours, and unfortunately in that day, that game did not go our way. Now, it could have. The biggest storyline was Grayson Rodriguez coming back. And Gray Rod had himself a phenomenal day. 6 innings, 7 Ks, 1 hit, 3 walks, no earned, and really, he was throwing a no-hitter for a while. I believe he threw a no-hitter through 5. So it was really just that last inning. And again, he didn't even give up any runs. Gray Rod looked phenomenal. And you would expect that. We've talked on this podcast about how I didn't even believe Grayson Rodriguez had a real injury. I believe the Orioles kind of manufactured it to buy a couple weeks of him to not have to throw. And it happened right when we brought back Bradish and Means. So, just numbers-wise, hey, let's just free up a roster spot while getting you a little short vacation and rest and all good. All good. That's what I believe it was. So him coming back looked like at times maybe he was slightly rusty at times. But overall, Gray Rod hummed and Gray Rod looked phenomenal. And that's what we expect from Grayson Rodriguez. I freaking love it. I absolutely love it. You love seeing him back. And now with this rotation having Corbin Burnes, Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, John Means, and then again, pick your 5th. Right now it's Dean Kramer. It might be Cole Irvin down the line. It might be Tyler Wells down the line. We might have 6 of them in the rotation in not too long. So we'll see about that. But the Orioles certainly could have won that game on Saturday. It was theirs for the taking, really. You had Hayes start off the scoring in the 2nd inning with a 1-0 sac fly, or a 1-run sac fly, making it 1-0. In the next inning, the 3rd, O'Hearn hit an RBI single, making it 2-0. Now, unfortunately, and even in the moment, it felt like this was a big deal. The Orioles left the bases loaded in that inning. Now, they got it loaded with 2 outs after the O'Hearn RBI. So you already did some damage, but there was a lot more damage to do there. And unfortunately, the Orioles couldn't capitalize, couldn't give themselves another huge inning, or even just a little bit more of a cushion early in the game. Ultimately, bit them in the ass, truly. Because if you score 1 there, who knows what happens with this game, right? In the 7th inning, again, Gray Rod had 6 innings, no runs allowed. So in the 7th, once he left, the Mariners tied it. Got 2nd and 3rd with no outs, got a fielder's choice. It was like ground ball to Westberg. He wasn't playing in. If he was playing in, maybe he has a play. Also, the ball kind of ate him up a little, not in a bobbling way, but just like having to receive it deep in his body. Had he been able to get kind of out in front of it and move up on it, maybe he can make that play and deliver the ball home. Either way, the Orioles sacrificed the run. Don't try to get the man at home, even if they maybe couldn't. Get the out at first. Fielder's choice. The game goes to 2-1. Keep the man at second. Unfortunately, then an RBI double ties the game in that 7th inning. Bottom of the 7th, too. Again, Orioles have their opportunities. They had first and second with 1 out. End up getting no runs off of that. Very disappointing there as well. You know, it's always nice to answer when the other team gets some runs on the board. Your next at bat, if you can get those runs back, just really is a big mental factor, right? The Mariners then end up taking a 4-2 lead with 2 RBI doubles in the 8th inning. Very annoying, and at that point, looked kind of like it wasn't the Orioles' day. In the 9th inning, though, Mariners get 2 outs. Gunnar Henderson comes up. Unfortunately, nobody was on because he hits yet another home run, making it 4-3. Fortunately, 2 outs. Adley's the next batter, strikes out, ends the game. Very unfortunate. But, like I said, the Orioles certainly could have won that game in multiple different ways, right? You could either be driving in more runs when you have those opportunities, bases loaded, 2 outs in the 3rd, first and second, 1 out in the 7th. Don't get any more runs out of those situations. So it certainly could have gotten more runs, right? Right there for the taking. Also, if you look at who the Mariners got their runs against, each Danny Kalum and Cano each threw just a third of an inning, each giving up 2 earned runs. Now, those are 2 of the best names in our bullpen over these last year and a half, going through last year. So, ultimately, and those guys have had good seasons. So, it happens. It certainly happens where these guys, it's not their day. And sometimes that lines up with 2 of your best guys not having their day. And ultimately, we lose the game because of that. It stinks. It also stinks like, okay, if you only give up 1 of those RBI doubles and not the second one in the 7th, and it's only a 3-2 game. And then Gunnar hits the home run, it's 3-3. Like, these things are right there for the taking. Even in losses, these Orioles are right there. And truly, it always feels as though they're going to find a way to come back. They're going to make this comeback. They have a ton already on the season, I believe 13 already on the season. So it happens, gang. It certainly happens at times. So series tied 1-1 going to the rubber match on Sunday. Orioles wind up taking that win, taking the series win, winning the game 6-3. Gunnar Henderson with yet another leadoff home run in the first. Westberg ends up getting an RBI single later in the first, make it 2-0 Orioles after the first inning. James McCann then hits an RBI double in the second. O'Hearn has a home run in the third. Mullins then has an RBI single in the third, making it 5-1 Orioles. Orioles essentially running away with it. Now, the Mariners tried to kind of chip their way back in, got 2 in the 7th to make it 5-3. But then the Orioles pretty much answer the next inning as the Mullins got an RBI single in the 8th, making it 6-3, the score that it winds up finishing at. Craig Kimbrell gets the save, 1-2-3. I believe it was his first save situation in 16 days, I believe, something along those lines. Remember, they had moved him out of the closer role for the moment, got him more in non-save situations, sometimes in extra innings, and he was performing well. Gets him back in that closer role like we talked about, like we predicted. Kimbrell would wind up getting this back, and things would get back to being good. Has 2 Ks in that 1-2-3 inning in the 9th. Closes out the game. Now, maybe the best part of this game, though, and the part to me that really was the reason the Orioles won the game, was Corbin Burnes. Corbin Burnes had 6 innings, strong innings. Gave up 7 hits and 1 walk, so a little more base runners than usual. Ended up with 11 Ks and only giving up 1 of those earned runs. So it was probably his best, if not second best start for the Orioles in general this year. Maybe opening day was slightly better, and that weather was very tough to pitch in. So it says a lot that he had a good day in that day. But certainly this was a dominating performance by Corbin Burnes. When he needed the strikeouts, again, 8 base runners in those 6 innings. So there are guys on. There are situations you need to get out of. Being able to do that, being able to get those strikeouts when you need them, preventing any runs from coming home at all. It's beautiful. Webb had the tough day, didn't even get an out, allowed 2 earned runs of those 3. Again, Corbin had the first one. Webb has been pretty solid for us as well, so I don't want to harp too much on him, although he's certainly, to me, maybe the one teetering with this roster spot at the moment. I could see a replacement for Jacob Webb at some point in the future, and appearances like that are not going to help, even if it didn't lose the game by any means. Now, like I said, Orioles take that series 2-1 against Seattle. Good enough. Again, you could have swept there. You could have come out with all 3. And if the Orioles were playing their best baseball, I believe they would have. Ultimately, though, you still saw some very good signs from there. Cedric Mullins finally coming on. I believe he was like 5 for 8 or something along those lines in that series. Colton Cowser had himself a nice series. Certainly, Gunnar Henderson is absolutely on fire, and we're loving every second of it. And we'll talk more about that in a second. Now, last night's loss against St. Louis, it's a tough one. Listen, that's a tough travel day, even though Sunday's game was early. Still, it's not the longest trip, but still, you're going on the road, all these back-to-back games, no days off. It's not the easiest thing to do, and the Orioles did look a little flat offensively. They got down 1-0 after the second inning. Then they were down 5-0 after the 4th inning when a big home run was hit. And the game really got away from Dean Kramer in that inning. He certainly could have performed better, maybe gotten more outs, not allowed the home run, whatever it may have been. That wasn't his best moment. He didn't have a bad game otherwise, but again, when you allow 5 in the first 4, certainly not the start you want. Now, the Orioles, offensively, though, looked even worse. And they were hitless through 5 innings. Going into the 6th, Sonny Gray had a no-hitter going against him. He then gets bad luck on the first 2 batters of the inning. 2 errors by their shortstop Mason Wynn, both resulting in base runners being on for Gunnar Henderson, who got the Orioles' first hit, which was his 4th straight game with a home run. Basically dead center, if you will, maybe a little to left field. Home run, 3-run shot, getting the game to 5-3 and making it look like, okay, here come these O's. That's what I was thinking. Here come these O's. Especially because after a guy gets out, you then find yourself with first and second with 1 out. But unfortunately, the Orioles cannot take advantage of that situation as they don't score either of those runs. The inning ends 5-3, and ultimately the game would end 6-3. And it stinks. It stinks, but again, it's not the easiest situation. St. Louis does have a talented team despite the fact that they've underperformed through last season. They were terrible last season record-wise. They're pretty crappy this year record-wise. But ultimately, there's a lot of talent on that field and a lot of good players. And it just isn't coming together for them necessarily. Again, the Orioles looked like they could have something going. In the 8th inning, they get a man on with a walk. Nothing happens. In the 9th inning, you get a man on with a walk. Nothing happens. So, certainly not the best game. I'm not going to harp too much on it. I'm very excited about these next 2 games coming up. I really think they can take advantage of Lance Lynn tonight. And then you have the former Oriole, Kyle Gibson, pitching against them in that 3rd game. And that's one of those I do get worried about sometimes. You know, his former teammate, especially just last year with all these guys he played with, essentially everyone on the roster he played with. Sometimes they know those scouting reports better on those hitters than anybody else. And they have a lot of practice against them, and especially in spring training. And then you remember how you got them out. And like sometimes that gives you all the confidence in the world. Otherwise, that could go the other way, though. There are a lot of hitters in the lineup, and some of these guys might feel really confident going up against Kyle Gibson. Might have a lot of good memories in spring training or in practice going up against Kyle Gibson. Might remember a conversation or two with Kyle Gibson where he maybe tells him, oh, what do you like to do here? How do you like to get a guy out there? That's where I would look at Adley Rutschman maybe having a big day in that game 3. Just saying, just throwing it out there. You know, a catcher that knows exactly where Gibson wants to be mentally. Okay. And especially if you know the Cardinals, they just lost their catcher for the season with a broken forearm. So, he doesn't even have the number 1 catcher. So, is the backup catcher really prepared and ready to handle the idea of changing a whole game plan because it's his former teammates? Or are they just going to say, let's just stick to the game plan? So I actually have relatively good instincts that the Orioles are going to take tonight's game, game 2, and tomorrow's game, game 3. And we'll see on that, obviously. Listen, optimistic, always. But I think I'm realistic, too. And we have some decent numbers against Lance Lynn. Expect maybe Cedric Mullins to keep doing well, even though he was 0 for last night. I think he might get back into the hitting ways. Maybe have a multi-hit game against Lance Lynn tonight. Also look for maybe Jorge Mateo to have a big night. And I mean, it goes without saying, Gunnar Henderson. Gunnar has never faced Lance Lynn before, but Lance has never faced Gunnar before. And this Gunnar is maybe the best Gunnar we've ever seen. So don't be surprised if Gunnar Henderson has himself another huge night. And that's going to take us right into our next segment. Gunnar Homerson, which right now is what I will call him. Because all the kid does is homer. You absolutely love it. Like we've said before, 4th straight game with a home run. Right now he's leading the majors with 16 dingers. On pace for 58 home runs, gang. On pace for 58 home runs. Be the most by an Oriole ever. I believe the record was 52 by Crush Davis. 58? He's not going to break it. He's going to crush it. No pun intended. Absolutely love seeing it. And I know the broadcast booth talks about it a lot. And I can't help but blame them because I can't blame them for it because he's just 22 years old. They constantly bring it up and they're like, can you imagine what he's going to be when he's 26 in 4 years? When he's 28 in 6 years? Like, assuming he stays healthy, which, please, stay healthy. Please. On everything. Stay healthy, Gunnar. But, golly, man. Gunnar Henderson is beyond a special player. He is everything he was advertised and more, gang. It's amazing watching this 22-year-old blossom into truly one of the best players in baseball and having the speed and the power, the home runs, the triples, the doubles, the steals. It is the defense. He, night in, night out, makes at least one, if not two or more defensive plays that make you go, wow. Or like a ball that looks like, dang, ground ball had eyes and got through. And out of nowhere, Gunnar comes out of nowhere, snags it, and throws the man out by 2-3 steps. Not just gets the out significantly, and made it look easy. He is a premier shortstop in this league and a premier player in this league. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. In fact, I heard something interesting, and I don't know if I'd heard this maybe in the draft process and forgot about it, but at the very least, they mentioned the other day that in high school he tore his Achilles. And to think man, he's doing all of this after recovering from a torn Achilles? Now, sure, that was when he was in high school. but he's only 22. What was that, 5 years ago? So it's outrageous to think how special and how much better he can get in his career. Either way, he's the perfect complement to a man we're going to talk about a little later in the episode, Adley Rutschman. And he really is the perfect complement to Adley because Adley is certainly has power, okay? Certainly has power from both sides of the plate, and we're seeing that consistently. But, in fact, our last episode was Adley Rutschman. Now we have Gunnar Homerson. So, certainly, Adley Rutschman brings the on base and the patience and all of that. But Gunnar is the perfect complement where he has that top-notch elite speed and top-notch elite home run hitting. And the duo of those two, truly, I don't know if you can pick a better duo in baseball right now. And they're both so young. Certainly Adley is older because he went to college and went through that whole process and maybe was even in the minors longer than Gunnar was. But overall, I mean, they are so young and talented and special. Golly, guys. Golly! I'm over the moon. I couldn't be any happier. And it's unbelievable to see where these Orioles are. And that's kind of going to be a talking point in the Adley Rutschman talk that we have a little later, is just reminiscing on where we were 2 years ago, gang. And seeing where we've come in a 2-year stretch and what we have in front of us, which is really 2 MVP caliber players, 2, 3, maybe 4 Cy Young caliber pitchers, one of the best bullpens in baseball, one of the toughest lineups through and through in baseball. Gang, it's unbelievable. It's so special. And I'm going to save some of this for that Adley Rutschman talk because there are some things I wrote down about just the feeling of all of this. And it means a ton to me. It means everything. I joke with people, but it's real. I've waited my whole life for this team. I have. 35 years old. I've waited my whole life for this team. Sure, I love those 90s Orioles. Ripken, Alomar, Palmeiro, BJ, Jesse Orosco, Messina, Jimmy Key, all of those guys. Scott Erickson, Armando Benitez. I freaking loved those teams. But those teams aren't as talented as this team right here. And I absolutely love the mid-2010 Orioles with, like we said, Chris Davis, Nick Markakis, the whole squad, gang, really. The whole squad, Adam Jones. Really, that was such a cool roster with Hardy and the year with Delman and just such a cool team. Weeders. But, guys, that team was certainly not as talented as this team. I've waited my whole life for this roster and to see it all start coming together and being this unbelievably successful team and seeing these players actually reaching their potential. Because how many years did we get told this prospect or that prospect, the Larry Bigbees of the world, and they wouldn't ever perform in the majors? The Jay Gibbons of the world, and they will never perform in the majors. And now we have this window that's not like the past two, that we got this window, but it's like a 2-3 year window. And then it's closing quick. Guys, this one's still opening. Understand, I can't contain my excitement because the window is opening still. Coming off of 101 wins last year. We already are on pace for close to that same thing, if not still that same record. We're easily one of the best teams in baseball. We have the most exciting young core in baseball. We have 2 MVP caliber young stars in Adley and Gunnar, and just role players and significant role players all around. And this window is only going to continue building and growing. And remember, prospect-wise, we've only scratched the surface, gang. We still got to get a successful Jackson Holiday in the majors, and we will. We still have to have a really successful Heston Kjerstad in the majors, and we will. We still need to have a very consistently excelling Colton Cowser in the majors, and I believe we will. We still are waiting for Mayo and Basallo and Povich and McDermott and all of these players. I can't contain my excitement, gang. I can't. I truly can't. All right. So, going to move on from Gunnar Homerson for a little. What else can you say about the kid? I know Brandon and I was joking that he's running out of adjectives to use. He's just special, gang. He's very, very, very special. And you love seeing it. Now, I talked about how, yes, the sweepless streak continues, and that is true. But there's another streak right now the Orioles have going that's leading the majors actively at the moment. And I don't know what the overall record for this is, but when I heard the number, I said, sounds like a lot. And maybe it's not close to the record, but it can't be that far off. Orioles have 20 straight games where they've either been tied or have the lead after the first inning. So, and that's significantly. I think the next one is like 14 or 15 or 13 or something along those lines. So, the Orioles just find a way to either come out pitching well. Again, just the first inning we're talking about. So, I personally feel like they've actually let up a good amount of second inning runs or third inning runs, but I also think we've gotten a good amount in the second and third inning. So I'd have to look into if we're plus or negative as far as the second and third go. But clearly in the first, we're net positive for the last 20 games at the very least, gang. And it's just so important getting off to a good start. We have those pitchers that are able to get the outs, come out firing. And sometimes that's the hardest inning for starters. Kind of get their wheels under them, kind of get going. And you also have an offense that when their pitcher does give up a run, can answer and tie it up or take a lead off of it. We saw it in that one game, in Friday's game. Down 1-0 after the top of the first, up 5-1 at the end of the first. This is a special Orioles team, and that's just the type of stat that shows you're getting off to really good starts. Clearly. And even if offensively, they haven't necessarily been the best over the last month or so. Well, at least the pitching is keeping them right in it. And at least we're not falling behind really early in the game, in the first inning. And if we are, we answer. It's a special group of guys. They're all there for business. I remember hearing the broadcast talk about that last night, about how they're not chatting in the dugout as much, that they're not necessarily having these like goofy games or fun games. Surely they have the Homer hose, even if Kyle Gibson is trying to put an end to it while they're in St. Louis. But overall, they're just there for business, man. They talk even these plane rides. These guys are business-like. They're not necessarily goofing off like crazy. Certainly, you have a couple goofballs. And you need a couple goofballs in any major league clubhouse. Whether it be Cole Irvin or Colton Cowser or even Adley Rutschman. You need a couple of these goofballs. But overall, this is a business mindset for this team. And I really think one of the reasons is something we kind of ended the show on last time, where we were talking about how, yes, they survived the sweepless streak again, but they were, Chris Mad Dog Russo and some other people are talking about they still got swept in the playoffs, and I don't want to hear about the streak, you still got swept, oh, yeah, yada, yada, yada. The best thing for this whole core and the future might have been to get swept last year in the playoffs. For real. For real. Like, did I hate it? Absolutely. Did it pain me? Sure. But if they weren't going to win it all last year, that might have been the best thing for them. Because they are business now. And that's something we talked about in spring training, I remember. When one of our spring training episodes, we were talking about how they are here for business, and everything you hear them say and everything they're talking about is strictly business. It's a beautiful thing because they also have more fun than anybody on that field. And at the same time, they're taking it just as businesslike as anybody else also in the league. They have that mix. They have that ability to kind of have fun, but never fucking lose focus. Excuse my language. Sorry for cussing. It's a family channel. All right. So we're going to go on Yankees watch a little bit. So the Yankees lost last night. Unfortunately, we did too, so we did not pick up a game on them. We're sitting 2 back on them. Yankees have 4 games already played in hand. All 4 are wins, though. We have the same amount of losses, but 4 less wins than the Yankees. That's not something that makes you feel good. Like, yeah, you're 2 games back, but really you're like 4 games back. Because they're 4 wins in their hand, right? And that sucks. I'm not too worried about it still. Truly, I'm not. The Yankees got very hot and against some mediocre opponents, okay? Now, we got to go through mediocre opponents too and really handle business as well. Yankees won 7 straight before last night. They had won, I don't have the exact numbers, but something like 9 of 10 or something along those lines, 12 of 15. They've gone on a very nice stretch, really, since they've lost 3 of 4 against Baltimore. And maybe that was a bit of a wake-up call for them because they saw how good we were. And they said, oh, crap. Oh, crap. They are great. And we need to do everything we can to stay with them. That's what they're thinking. So they did right off of the series. Now, again, they lost last night. They're still technically hot. Okay, they are. But overall, I'm still not worried. If you look at the Yankees as a whole, I've talked about how, yeah, they're not at their full strength either. There's obviously missing Garrett Cole. I haven't heard any reports about Garrett Cole either. Not that I've been looking into him, but that's just something if there was like breaking news that he was really coming back soon, like I feel like I would have heard it. I watch baseball shows all day, every day. I'm on the news looking at it all the time. So as far as baseball news goes, not real news, because that's not how I want to live my life. Anyway, so listen, they don't have DJ LeMahieu yet either. Jason Dominguez hasn't even started his rehab assignment, I believe. I only know that because he's on my fantasy team and my minor league spot, neither here or there. But there's some talk that he might need not just a longer rehab, but he might not even really come back till next year. Now, I personally think they're going to wind up getting him back at some point around the All-Star break, maybe a month after. Just my gut instinct, but he has to perform and be healthy enough for them to move him up. And frankly, I'd be thrilled if they didn't move him up this year because I think he's a real player. Whereas some of their other players, while they might be performing solidly, I'm just not buying it necessarily in all of them. I think there will be a massive Giancarlo cold streak. If not, he's already in partially one. Judge started out in a massive cold streak. You have to imagine he's going to carry himself through successfully. Same with Juan Soto, who really is the other candidate for AL MVP. I mean, you might want to say Bobby Witt Jr. I believe there's another random name in there that I saw. But overall, to me, it's Soto or Henderson right now. And we'll see. We'll see. Outside of those two, though, I'm not a big believer in these Yankees. We talked about how much They've been shut out compared to the Orioles, how they're very streaky, up, down, up, down. One day 12 runs, one day no runs, one day 10 runs, the next day no runs again. And just not consistent, whereas these Orioles feel extremely consistent. So I'm still a big believer. Let's not judge it now. Hell, let's not even judge it in a month or so. Because if you look at the Orioles schedule especially, again, we have these couple series against kind of underperforming or not good teams like the Cardinals, the White Sox next, I believe. But then you get to somewhat murderer's row, right? In fact, I have it in front of me right now. After St. Louis, we got Chicago White Sox. After Chicago, we get Boston. Then Toronto, then Tampa, then Toronto, then Tampa again. Now, they're hard, but we play the division well. But then after that, you have Atlanta, Philly, Yankees, Houston, Cleveland, Texas. Tough teams. Very tough teams. So we don't even have to judge it out of there. Right? We can wait until after. We can wait until even after All-Star break when we come back with Texas, Miami, San Diego, Toronto, Cleveland, Toronto, Tampa, Washington, Boston, Mets, Houston, Dodgers. And then we end, like we know, with 27 games against real crap. Colorado, White Sox again, Tampa, Boston, Detroit, San Fran, Detroit, Yankees, Minnesota. That's pretty crappy, especially when you think a lot of those teams might be out of it. San Fran, Detroit, Chicago, Boston, Colorado. Like, those are teams that should be out of it. So, we don't have to be in the lead for the division now. We don't have to be in the lead for the division at the All-Star break. I fully believe that with our consistency and our talent, we're going to win that division, again, by 3 to 5 games over these Yankees. And that's if the Yankees continue to play very good baseball relatively consistently. Because if they start falling off and they start sputtering, Orioles could run with that division by 8, 10, 12 games. True. That's what I believe. Time will tell, but either way, all we can focus on is ourselves. So that was a little bit of Yankees watch. We'll kind of keep our eye on it. Again, 2 back, but it's kind of a little tougher than just a straight 2 because they have 4 more games, all of which are wins. But we'll see. I still like our guys, as Buck Showalter once said. I like our guys. All right, so very small minor league report. We talked about Coby Mayo leaving the game in our last episode after a little collision. Apparently, he fractured a rib or 2. He's going to be out for a few weeks, so that stinks. That's annoying. Ultimately, I still didn't think he was going to make his way to the major league roster just yet. So ultimately, I don't think it hinders really any of our plans. Just stinks because he was having a great year. He was really taking strides, not just offensively, but defensively. But sometimes a little time away can actually benefit a player. Because remember, his strikeout to walk ratio, or just his strikeout ratio, was up this year from about mid-20s to mid-30s. So maybe, hey, take a couple weeks, watch some film, think about stuff, mentally focus on how that goes back to improving, which is one of the things probably preventing you from taking that leap to the majors. Also, maybe this opens up the door, like I said, for my guy, Coby Mayo. For Connor Norby. I think Connor Norby would be a very nice piece on this team and probably provide the Orioles with more of a benefit than Stowers or Heston is this season. Just my feel for it. Just my feel. And also remember, we swear Jackson could be back within a couple weeks. I know he's been good, not great in the minors, but again, I think the Orioles told Jackson Holliday, we're okay if you struggle now in some other aspects that you were excelling in. We want to see you excel in these specific areas that you struggled in the majors. So we trust everything else you can kind of click back on. But we need you to focus on getting better at this because next time you come up, we want you to stay up. That's what I think. and we'll see what happens. Having to turn the page because that's how many topics we have today, guys. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is 2 years with Adley Rutschman. And it's been a beautiful 2 years, right? You can't state enough how special of a player and a mental and physical talent he is. And how he just has this vibe. It's something I talked about when they drafted him and all the way through the minors. They just has this aura about him that brings everybody and everything together, and just everything starts working and everything's building for championships, and you find a way to get there and win it. It reminded me of Buster Posey, truly. And I still am there. I still believe he is that glue, okay? But we have numbers, right? So in between the Orioles drafting Adley 1 overall and the day they called him up, okay, 2 years ago, there were 365 games played in that span. Kind of cool, 365 days, 365 games, whatever. Anyway, so in those 365, the Orioles were 129 and 236, a win percentage of 353, and projected over 162 game schedule would put them on 57 wins. Ugh. Like, that's what we were dealing with before, guys. Like, 105 loss season is basically what we were on pace for over those 365 games. Now, in 328 games with Adley on the roster, they're 197 and 131 for a win percentage of 600. 6 out of every 10 games they win with Adley on the roster. Over the course of 162 game schedule, that's a 97 win pace. That just shows you the difference. Now, certainly, it's not all Adley. You know what I mean? Adley was like the first one that they brought up to kind of break through, to be signal, like wave the flag. We're here, we're starting to come for it. And now we're going to bring our talent up, like Gunnar and Westberg and all these other guys that have followed since. But Adley was that first one. So it can't all be put on with Adley, because there have been a lot of talent brought up since they brought up Adley. And frankly, in those 365 in between Adley and bringing up Adley, drafting Adley and bringing him up, they weren't trying to win, right? The lineups that they were putting out involved like Richie Martin and DJ Stewart, and it was ugly, gang. Like, I have a screenshot from not long ago from one of those lineups, and it is putrid. So, okay. So it's a change in mentality by not just Adley brought, but like that was brought by the organization, and it was signaled by Adley coming up. So it's no surprise that we become a more winning team. But that's a huge jump that's a 40-game difference over 162 games. I mean, I put a lot of that on Adley, again, while the organization flipped the switch also in the move to bring him up. Just the aura around him flipped the switch for everybody around. I truly, truly believe that. Now, I have written down what Adley brought us, okay? And I have Adley brought us the vibes and the hopes, changing quiet hopes into boisterous belief, an unwavering conviction, a true belief in a future pennant and future World Series championship. That's the vibe, that's the aura that Adley brought with him. And certainly his skill provides that as well and benefits all of that. But I'm not going to understate the mental and just the vibe, because it's real. It's an aura that he brings, that he brought, that it just felt different. It's almost like, there's that video where he walks out to home on the first game and he kind of is just spinning around looking at the Camden Yards. Envisioning what got him here, envisioning what he's going to bring there, like envisioning everything that was and will be. And it's almost like a spell. He cast a spell, like he turned around and it was this new world. Like when he stood there at first, it was the old world of the Oriole baseball. And by the time he made that rotation and turned around, he was looking at the new world of Orioles baseball. And we all were. And it just had that vibe and that feeling. And since then, these Orioles have been one of absolutely the best teams in baseball. And they're just going to continue doing it. We've talked the sweepless streak. That continues after the Seattle series to 106 games. Assuming they can win one of these games in St. Louis, at least one, that pushed to 107. They have the record for American League teams. They're still, I believe, third overall. I want to say that if they continue this, they would break it sometime in that mid to late July period. Overall, though, I have to, again, put that on Adley. Because 105 of those 106 series were with Adley. And, again, he just brings this never quit attitude, this never die feeling, and just belief that we're never out of it. And we're going to continue. And we're going to win this game. And we're going to not get swept. Because getting swept really puts you in a hole. And so we're never going to get swept. And listen, there's some luck involved for sure. But I can't help but think that just goes right along with the Adley Rutschman aura. Now, it hasn't just been in the aura and the vibes. There's actual stats to back this up. So if we go from the beginning of 2021 to middle 2022, or to the time they brought Adley up, okay? So May 21st of 2022. So about a year and a quarter, year and a third, whatever you want to say. Orioles were scoring 3.95 runs per game, just under 4 runs a game. Since Adley's been brought up, 4.77 runs a game, closing in on 5 runs a game. Now, that might not sound like a huge difference, but it is. Again, the record shows a 40-run differential or a 40-win differential. So it matters, okay? If we go to that same period, 2021 through 2022 without Adley Rutschman, okay? So we'll look at the whole 2022 season, but games without Adley Rutschman catching in that season. The Orioles pitchers had a 5.31 ERA. Since May 21st of 2022, with Adley catching, the Orioles pitchers have a 3.77 ERA. A whole 1.5, basically, point differential in ERA. Massive. Absolutely massive. And that's just how good Adley is working with those pitchers. Developing the repertoire, his catching ability, his framing ability, his throwing out ability. Even though I believe all of those aspects could improve over time. I think he will get better at throwing guys out. I think he will get better at pitch framing. I think he will get better at defense as a whole. That doesn't mean he's not elite in all of them currently. All right? So, and just the way, again, mentality-wise and vibes and belief that he gives off on these pitchers, working with them, it's special. It's beyond special. Now, when you compare him to American League catchers, both this season and last season, this year, he leads all American League catchers with a WAR of 2.1. He's second as far as catchers go in the AL in hits and home runs. Last year, he led all American League catchers in hits, on base percentage, doubles, and runs. This year, he's on pace to set career highs in hits, runs, batting average, home runs, RBIs, and OPS. Dominating. Absolutely dominating. Truly in contention for this year's AL batting title. Right now he's sitting in 5th, just over 300, 304, which is great. I'll take that any day of the week. But if some guys start regressing and maybe he even makes a little bit of a push, Adley Rutschman could certainly find himself in that batting title race. And if nothing more, I believe he will most likely win at least one, if not multiple batting titles over the course of his career. Because that's just what he does. That's just who he is. And again, now he's being even a little more aggressive, which is resulting in more hits. Less walks, but more hits. More power, more doubles. These are big things, gang. Overall, these last 2 years with Adley Rutschman have not only lived up to expectations, but exceeded them almost beyond belief. Again, remember where we were sitting 2 years ago. And the Orioles, they weren't doing very well, and they had very poor lineups and pitching staffs, and they were still the butt of the AL East and really the whole league. And they had bottomed out, gang. Like the few years before that, and gang, it was as bad as it gets. And this front office and organization just did everything right and found a way to exceed these rebuilding expectations. I mean, I would have been happy if I waited another 5 years and got kind of this awesome, like 2014 run for a few years. Instead, we have a potential dynasty on our hands. And again, it all was signified by Adley Rutschman coming up. And not just, again, with just him coming up. It's not all him by any means. Like, a part of it is the organization brought him up to signal, we are here. We're ready to compete. And truly, the rest of that 2022 season, they did compete. They had an outside chance at making the playoffs that year. And they just fell short. But I'll never forget, I remember being moved to tears at the end of the season. Truly. I'm not lying to you. Like, watching the recap of the season and literally being moved to tears because they made me so happy during that year. Like, watching them be competitive and being this good ball club again just made me so proud and happy that literally I cried tears of joy multiple times. And that was about 2022. We didn't even, I think, finish at 500. Or we just finished at 500. Like, dang. Compared to last year, again, cried tears of joy. Like, yeah, it sucked getting swept by the Rangers in the playoffs. But, God, there were so many good moments of last year. And, like, the joy this team brings us on a night in, night out basis is just a beautiful thing. And I don't say it lightly, even though I do say it jokingly, that I've waited my whole life for this team. And I just want to take a second and tell the fans, like, enjoy this. Enjoy it, gang. We've waited so long for this. Don't get spoiled. Wait till they win a couple rings to get spoiled at least. Like, for now, just enjoy it, gang. Enjoy watching one of the best teams in baseball every single night. The team that we root for, the team that we grew up loving, finally being back to prominence. And understand just how much is to come because of the players that we have, that we're building this around, are so young and talented. And we have just an entire pool of young, talented players waiting to add to this. The sky is the limit, gang. And I just want you to take a breath and enjoy it. And have fun with it. And cry tears of joy that it's here. And that they bring you so much joy. And don't be afraid of getting your heart broken. Don't be afraid of heartbreak again, because it might happen. I would absolutely love for us to reach the pinnacle this year and win the World Series. But guess what? It doesn't always work like that. We may have to wait another 3, 5, 7 years till we finally get it. But I'm sitting here telling you, this core will get us our World Series back. They will win the pennant. They will get us to the promised land, gang, at one point or another. Just trust in it, have faith in it, and really just have fun with it, gang. Be happy that we're back and enjoy watching these games as much as I do. Because I do. They put a smile on my face every time it's good. And guess what? Yeah, when the games don't go our way like last night, it does ruin my moment. But there's a bigger picture. Then I think about it. And I go, dang. We're what, the 5th best record in baseball right now? I think 3rd at the moment, best record in the AL. Hopefully soon to be 2nd after tonight. Again. Hopefully soon to be best record in baseball in a few weeks. Gang. My point is that just enjoy it, man. Just enjoy that these O's are back. And don't be afraid. Take a step back and remember what we were before they brought Adley up. And how bleak it seemed. And even though we had the hope of, this prospect Adley Rutschman, or, this prospect Gunnar Henderson, or, this prospect or that prospect. Like, even though we had that hope, we also had all of that pain and all of that memory of losing and failure and failed prospects and missed draft picks and all of it. But don't be afraid. Don't let that get in your way of falling in love with this Orioles team. Now, again, I've loved the Orioles my entire life. Even the worst Orioles teams, I still had love for. But there's difference from being in love and falling in love. And you need to fall in love with these Baltimore Orioles if you haven't already. And I'm sure you have. Just like I have. Because they're fun to watch and they put a smile on my face like I hope they put a smile on your face. So just enjoy it, gang. I'm not going to let you bring me down because, the Orioles have a little too many blown saves at this point. Or, they're a little sporadic here. This or all that. Or, I'm not going to let you bring it down. I'm going to stay smiling. And I believe they're going to make us smile big time, at least in these next 2 games. And throughout the course of the rest of the season. And hopefully in the postseason as well. All right, so we got a couple more things to talk about. Just want to touch on Cole Irvin and kind of his usage and what he's doing. He came in from a bullpen role now. He was in the rotation doing a great job. Thought maybe you couldn't take him out. They would go 6-man. When Grayson Rodriguez came back, instead they decided to push Cole Irvin to the pen as they brought Gray Rod back for the moment. Okay, so Brandon Hyde made it clear. Well, first, Cole Irvin made it clear that whatever the team needs, that's what he's willing to do. Whatever the team needs. Listen, this ain't Cole Irvin's first rodeo. He's a seasoned Major League veteran at this point in his life. And he understands that, listen, sometimes you have to change roles. Sometimes you have to be willing to adjust. It's not about you, it's about the team. And that's what Cole Irvin understands. And clearly, he's willing to do whatever it takes to win this season. Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So, if Cole Irvin pitches great this year for the Orioles, whether it's in the pen or in the rotation, and he keeps a positive attitude, that's good for the team, clearly. But what's good for the team will be good for Cole Irvin come next year. Because then the Orioles could find a suitor for him that he actually has a spot on. Because by next year, there might not be a spot. But then the better he performs, not only is he going to get a better opportunity, but also the Orioles are then going to bring back a better piece for Cole Irvin. Because he's not a free agent, I think, till 2026. So, still a lot of control. And it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. But when we look at what Brandon Hyde has said, I really believe that we were correct in projecting that the Orioles would go 6-man rotation soon. And frankly, Hyder alluded to that. Because he said that since the Orioles have 43 games in 45 days, an insane number, they're probably going to go to a 6-man rotation throughout the bulk of that, or at least the meat of that. So don't worry when Cole Irvin is making, a couple appearances in the pen, because then he'll jump in and make a spot start too. And the Orioles are going to figure this out as they go. But they have a lot of talent, and guys like Cole Irvin have only made their hard decision even more hard because they performed at such a high level. And frankly, it's one of these things that they perform so well, we can't even imagine not having Irvin on the team. It's just whether he's in the rotation or the bullpen. But he's going to be one of our arms up in the majors. It's a great thing. It's the same thing for Suarez. Same exact situation. And don't be surprised if Albert Suarez maybe makes a spot start here and there. If maybe they have to use Cole Irvin out of the pen and they needed that 6th starter, so then they save Suarez and use him instead. We'll figure it out. These guys are willing to do whatever they need to for the team. And they are all businesslike. So it's a great thing to see. Now, in kind of my research for the show today, I saw that it is former Orioles outfielder Joey Rickard's birthday, 33rd birthday. Happy birthday, Joey Rickard. I actually have had a moment with Joey Rickard in the past. So, as you know, I'm from Philly, live outside of Philly. One year when the Orioles were playing the Phillies in Philly, I went and I sat in left field. Now, this was back when the Orioles were bad, really bad. So there wasn't really much to care about. And I remember sitting with my one buddy, Hendo, and I was telling him how Joey Rickard has an absolutely gorgeous girlfriend. Oh, she is stunningly beautiful. Not that you should be surprised. He's a good-looking guy and at the time a major league player. Yeah, sure, he can get a dime. But I was telling him about this. So then I pull up Instagram to go show him, and she's gone. She's gone from his social media. I can't find her anywhere. And when I did, down the rabbit hole find her, all his stuff is gone from hers. And I'm like, what happened? Now I was a little tuned up. This isn't necessarily the nicest thing ever, but I was a little tuned up. And I start obnoxiously screaming because, again, it's pretty dead quiet. Nobody at the time cares about the Orioles. Orioles are crap. I think they were getting crushed that day probably. So the ballpark was a little quiet at that point. Everyone was kind of just mulling around enjoying themselves. So I start screaming, Joey! Hey! Joey! Joey! And everybody in the crowd's looking at me. Nobody even knows who Joey Rickard is in Philly. And, Joey's a fairly common name, so I think half the people were looking, going, my name's Joey, what? Thinking I was talking to them. Typical Philly. Oh, what? Anyway, eventually, I start screaming, Joey, what happened to the girlfriend, man? Oh, Joey, what happened to the girlfriend? At which point, people around me are like, the fuck? And Joey Rickard is looking around, looking back at me, and I'm looking right at him going, Joey, what happened to the girlfriend? And I don't think he liked that very much. I can imagine he looked a little sad after I said that and turned around and didn't look back. Certainly don't feel bad if I made him feel, or certainly I feel bad if I made him feel bad. I'm not saying that wasn't my intent. I was just more curious and hoping maybe I could get an answer. Because again, it all happened because I was trying to show my boy Hendo his beautiful girlfriend who then wasn't his girlfriend anymore. So overall, stupid little story. One of the many times that I chirped players at games. This one wasn't as harsh as maybe some of them were. I remember like Cliff Floyd flipped me and friends off one time during a Phillies game. I had an interesting moment with Jason Worth at a Nationals-Orioles game, his first year in Washington. And that's a better story. That's a good story that I'll save for another day. Save for a Jason Worth interesting tidbit day or something. The only reason I told it is because, hey, Joey Rickard's birthday. So happy birthday, Joey. Hope you found another girlfriend. I'm sure you did. And hope you're doing well, bud. Hope you're doing well. The Orioles are doing quite well without you, which, isn't your fault. You were solid for us. I think 300-something games for the O's. Like, I enjoyed Joey Rickard as a player. At a certain point, though, he just was average. Hey, got to the bigs, though. Did your thing, Joey. Good for you. And I'm sure you got another dime on your arm at this point. So, with that being said, gang, we're going to call a wrap on this episode. Episode 26, the Boog Powell of episodes. Gunnar Homerson was the title of this one. And it was a fun one. A lot to catch up on. A lot going on. Remember, I think the Orioles have 2 good games left in St. Louis, and they're going to take both of them. So be on the watch for that. Don't be surprised if Gunnar hits himself a home run in a 5th straight game tonight against Lance Lynn. And, yeah, like I said, Cedric Mullins, be on the lookout with Jorge Mateo for hits tonight. And then the next day, we'll see what happens, gang. All right, with that being said, this is another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. Let's go!